Welcome to the Nerd Party.
I'm Jessica Nunn.
I'm Phillip Gilfus.
And this is Ceti Alpha 3. Welcome to Ceti Alpha 3, a Star Trek podcast. You're on the Nerd Party, and I'm Jessica Nunn, joined by my co-host, Phillip Gilfus.
Hello.
Hello. So, Phillip, why does this planet look remarkably like Elizabethan England right now?
I don't know, but this collar is very itchy.
But you look good in it.
I try to carry it off very well.
Yes.
So, I don't know, as far as Star Trek stuff that we did this week, I know it's probably been out there a little bit, but we did watch the deleted scene, or mini-sode.
Definitely a mini-sode, yes.
Whatever, from Star Trek Discovery, with the Mirror Captain. So, I don't know, I guess reveals that Section 31 is returning. Sigh. To Star Trek Discovery.
Now, what don't you like about Section 31?
Well, I guess to me, and this is obviously my personal opinion, obviously people will disagree, but I just think it's not very Star Trek, in as much, I know that's a controversial statement, but what I'm trying to say is, though, is that it makes it another show. You know, it makes it a intrigue show, or like a scandal kind of show, or whatever. It's all this undercover, dark, and
investigative
and spy stuff, or blurring the lines, which I mean Star Trek Discovery has done to a little bit with the whole, do I blow up the Klingon Kronos, or do we stop the war and all that?
Yes.
But
and
anyway.
Of course starting with a mirror universe. I mean the whole,
exactly, that's the reason why I'm not a fan per se of the mirror universe, but I don't know, and that's just my opinion. I know people have different thoughts, and that's fine. But that's kind of where it's like Star Trek.
But they're wrong.
Well, with Star Trek Discovery, in my opinion, already being a little bit dark, I don't want to go darker.
Yes,
I think what Section 31
that's fair. Both literally and figuratively, I assumed. This was a very dark, badly lit clip.
Yeah, it's. I mean, unless you're on the Discovery itself, it's usually pretty dark. It's rarely daytime on a planet, except that one episode. I'm blanking on the title, where it's sort of the happy-go-lucky sprites with Saru, and he ended up getting brainwashed or whatever.
Oh, right, yes. But even then, it was like a wintry kind of thing.
So,
yeah. I enjoyed this as an idea. I don't understand the idea that it's a deleted scene, because I don't know where it would have fit.
Right, unless it's because it came out at WonderCon, which is in LA. But what's the point? When they release the Discovery Season 1 Blu-ray, is this going to be deleted scene, or is it really just more as you were calling
a mini-sode? Yeah,
just a tease for Season 2,
or the start of a spin-off.
Ooh. I would be fine if that whole Mirror Section 31 was just a spin-off, and then we could maybe lighten things up in Season 2, since we're quote unquote out of the war. I mean, but I don't know.
And make the choice not to watch the spin-off.
Well.
You're never going to do that, are you? That's never going to be an option.
Well, we have to talk about it.
Yes, fair enough.
But what did you want to talk about this week?
Well, this week I wanted to talk about a Star Trek film. I wanted to talk about Star Trek VI, Undiscovered Country.
Ooh.
Yeah.
The final journey for the TOS crew, except for the part where they came back in Generations and then came back in Next Generation. But whatever. The final, and then the reboot with JJ, but the final.
But the definitive final. And also, I think probably a little bit lazily written, because how many words do you have to put in on your own when you fill it with so much Shakespeare?
Yes. Now, I mean, there's certainly, it seems to me, there's some sprinklings, maybe in Star Trek 2, not very little, but a little bit. It's very literary, Star Trek 2. You have Khan, you have Dickens, bookends with Spock, and you have Khan doing some Melville, and so a little bit of Shakespeare maybe back for too. But yeah, this is Star Trek 6. It's hard not to talk Shakespeare. I mean, it's in the bleeding title.
It is in the bleeding title, yes. So The title is based on a quote from Hamlet.
Right, and I've always had a problem with it. Now, look, I'm not the Shakespeare expert by any means, but I've always had trouble because in the dinner scene, you have Chancellor Gorkon, sort of the Chancellor of the High Klingon High Council, and he sets it up for both the audience and the characters. He says, to the undiscovered country, and everyone's like, WTF? And he's like, the future. And they're like, oh, undiscovered country means the future, but it doesn't. I mean, the way I read the text, and again, I'm not an expert on Hamlet, it's death. That's what I get, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're definitely right. And I think there are sort of some layers to this, if you will.
Makes it more complicated.
It does make it more complicated. First of all, I think it's intended to be this moment where he says the undiscovered country, and everybody says, oh crap, are we all about to be slaughtered? And also the suggestion, when Hamlet is doing his to be or not to be,
Tachbe, tachba.
Right, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But when he's doing it, he's talking about choices and the idea that death is such an unknown. It's a change that is unknown. And in the same way that's the whole crux of this film, is that change is unknown. Kirk, how can I trust these people? This change, this idea of there being peace is so unknown, and of course the idea that they're all about to be decommissioned. Mm-hmm. There's all of this change in their world.
Hopefully just the ship is going to be decommissioned, not the people, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know. Undiscovered world. So yeah, there's all of this change happening in their lives that is, as it is for anybody, really, really scary.
Now, the thing about Shakespeare, and I say this about anything, whether it's the U.S. Constitution, whether it's
be careful, because I feel about Shakespeare the way you feel about the Constitution.
Well, I was going to say, just like the Bible, just about anything, I'm always hesitant when people just pull a verse and don't give us
context.
And so I figure with the undiscovered country, instead of taking my word for it, why don't we hear the whole thing in context? And right. Of course, it does come from the actual to be or not to be speech, which is from Hamlet.
Act 3, Scene 1.
As Spock, I suppose, correctly denotes.
Yes. So and it is, of course, one of the most famous, at least as you say, bits and pieces of it, are the most famous from all of Shakespeare. So,
Jessica, you want to give us the actual full Hamlet speech?
I really, really do. Here we go. To be, or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life, for who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no travelers return, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment with disregard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action.
See, like how Enterprise made its way in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there you go. There's no discovery, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It'll come.
Yeah. Well, undiscovered.
Right.
But that's where Hamlet is saying death, the undiscovered country. And, which no traveler comes back again. Now...
And he's saying, this is why we put up with the dreadfulness that is life, because the alternative is unknown. Mm-hmm. And that's so true. And again, with Undiscovered Country, the Klingons and the rest of the universe have been in this Cold War for so long, and that's a terrible place to be.
Now, Captain, in space, all warriors are cold ones.
But it's preferable to the unknown. We'd rather put up with this terrible stuff rather than the potential terrible stuff we haven't been able to imagine yet, is the suggestion.
And then I wonder, and this may be going too deep, but that's what we do on here. To Klingons, is death mean the future? You have the Klingon belief, which I don't know if it's clearly established in TOS, but we know from Greater Star Trek, you have Stovacor, sort of their Klingon version of heaven, or... Oh, Lordy, I can't believe Klingon Hell. I'm blanking on it, and I know the name, but I'd have to look it up. I'm not going to look it up, folks. But anyway, you remember. It's not Grendel. That's from Gilgamesh. But anyway.
No, that's definitely from Beowulf. You are terrible at this literature game.
But anyway, there's the Klingon version of Hell. I'm blanking on the name. We saw it in the Voyager episode. But anyway, and so maybe it's a Klingon thing that I'm messing up with my human, if you could only hear yourself, stereotype.
Interesting. So, yeah, there you go. There's the title. There's the background behind it. Make your own decision. You should let us know. You should tweet at us.
That's right.
And tell us what you think the Undiscovered Country really means.
Right. And, of course, our Twitter is @Join Nerd Party, or you can find us on Facebook @The Nerd Party, and just let us know. I don't know. # Klingon Shakespeare. I don't know. But speaking of Klingon Shakespeare, the sort of the running joke of all of Star Trek is, you've never heard Shakespeare until you've read it in the original Klingon. And so I suppose talking Star Trek and Shakespeare, it is interesting to talk about Klingon Shakespeare. How do they understand it? Since they seem to be very familiar with it,
Yes, yeah. And one of the things when I was preparing for this, I did a little bit of research on it. And the suggestion on Tinternet is that this is a throwback during the beginning, building up to World War II. Nazi Germany claimed that Shakespeare was actually German, that he wrote in German, and that the English appropriated it and stole it from the Germans and made it their own. And so this is the suggestion that the Klingons are doing a similar thing to what the Nazis did, is claiming Shakespeare as their own, when maybe that's not completely accurate.
I don't know, Dolly. I don't think Shakespeare existed. I think he was a bunch of Klingon authors who we now know.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course the Klingon Lord, because, lords don't write theater, so he had to do it under a pseudonym.
Exactly.
And possibly a woman.
Yeah, I think. And then, Kit Marlowe may have been Andorian. We don't know.
Well, I think the fact that he was killed in a bar fight because he was a spy strongly points to...
Yes, spy for the Andorians.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I don't see any other explanation.
No, I think conspiracy revealed.
Indeed.
So
done.
But yeah, it is, well, maybe only to us, but I think it is interesting to understand how Klingon Shakespeare, because... they've translated Shakespeare into Klingon, which you may think is really super nerdy or clever.
But which was initially quite difficult to put this scene together.
Right, because they're, according to, I think, was it Mark? I can't remember his last name. O'Kroner. I'm getting his name wrong. But anyway, the gentleman who they usually use, at least in the TOS era, I know, Discovery uses a very... uses a young lady now for their Klingon, but who's... name, I'm sorry, blanks. I know I follow her on Twitter, and she's Canadian. That's all I can remember. But anyway, I apologize. But Mark, at the time, when doing the translation, was that the way he set up the language, just to be difficult, is that there's no to be, literally, the verb to be, être, in French, or whatever, there's no to be in Klingon, and so he had to do to be not without using those words, and so actually forget what it is literally in Klingon to make.
Couldn't he just invent the verb to be in Klingon? I don't. If you make up the language, you can't then be stumped by it because you can fix it.
So, but yeah, how they would view different things, the lessons of Shakespeare. Well, they say the lessons, but anyway, the storylines of Shakespeare. How much do they go with Klingon culture or the honor culture, and certainly the tragedies might be.
Well, and obviously we're going to get a little more in depth with all of this, but so much of what Chang in particular quotes are kings.
Right.
History, generals, because that's, the whole idea of most of the kings were that they were in wars.
Mm-hmm.
So that may have something, if the Klingons are indeed a warlike species, the histories are the ones that they would cling to most.
Cling to.
So, yeah, that's high five.
Yeah.
Richard III, even Julius Caesar, because you've got this political assassination.
Well, see, and I'd be interested in Klingon culture because, and again, I've never seen Julius Caesar, but what you've told me of the story is that, it's mostly about the consequences with Brutus and everything. But the moralizing, for lack of a better word, of that, how it is to a Klingon who, they're not, I don't know, how much do you want to see Klingons just being simple brutes? Because that may be who they are, maybe that may be oversimplifying it, but would the morality or the consequences still be there in Klingon culture?
I think that they can be subverted in the same way that Chang gives us one of the most moving speeches from Merchant of Venice, when you prick us, do we not bleed, all of that bit. And that is the Jew giving that speech, and it's so moving, and there's so much about, the anti-Semitism in Merchant of Venice, but that moment is very human for the Jew. And so for Chang to use that in a place that's completely inappropriate, the Jew of Venice, and for some reason his name is completely escaping me. We'll Google it. I apologize.
We're not doing well today.
No. But his whole thing is, you've been dreadful to me throughout this whole play. What did you expect to happen? When you prick us, do we not bleed? And the opposite, or not even the opposite, but just not the thing. Shylock. There is no oppression of the Klingons in this. And so for Chang
is that the argument? Because, this is all viewpoints, and I think it's easy to watch this film, because, I think it's one of the best Star Trek movies. But, obviously from our hero's perspective. But if you're going to kind of tweak it a little bit, because, certainly, obviously, this whole story is supposed to be I don't know if allegory would be the right word, but anyway, a parallel to the fall of the Soviet Union. You have Gorkon as Gorbachev, and you have Praxis as...
Tear down this wall.
No, where the nuclear accident was in
Chernobyl.
Chernobyl. And so connecting those sort of concepts, which not necessarily were connected in real life, but connecting those concepts and what would it mean, when the wall falls and having to deal with the end of the Cold War and blah, blah, blah. But as far as Klingon culture, how do they see themselves now? Because they're now having to, I think the dinner scene is there, you're going to destroy our culture, which is kind of, you see in Discovery, right? Which is maybe a different, but how they're talking about the dissolution or their culture being watered down because of Federation influence of diversity and blah, 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 all this stuff, which we see in the modern times. I'm not trying to get too whatever about cultures reacting to is assimilation or is quote unquote diversity, or, what does this mean for who we are, whatever culture you're talking about, any culture in the world, could be in a good way or quote unquote bad way. What does this mean? But with Klingons who are now finding themselves in a weak place, which of course is a Klingon they don't like to be anyway, what does this mean? Does it mean death?
The undiscovered country. To bring it back to it. And yes, I see your point, But again, because he's clearly the villain of this story, that quote is almost farcical. And also, you know, and nobody points this out really in the film, but, you know, as you're bringing it into all sorts of potential 21st century implications rather than 25th century or whatever, wherever we are, 23rd century. The idea is that if anything doesn't grow and change, it dies.
Or Chang.
Or Chang. Stop that. Don't do that. Nobody likes it when they will stop listening to our podcast. So if you are so desperate because change is so scary.
Which is the whole theme of the movie.
Right. Because change is so scary, if you choose then to stay static, the only other option really is death.
Right.
Because it dies.
Even on the Federation side, it's the same thing. They don't want, well, the conspirators, the Admiral, and Lieutenant Valeris, and it's interesting because we watched the version we watched of Star Trek 6. I don't know what version to call it. It's not the theatrical one because I don't know if it's director's cut you would call it or whatever, but there are a lot of scenes that are deleted, I think, because for instance, Colonel West, Odo is considered a deleted scene because it's very seamless. So,
yeah, no, that wasn't something I picked up on.
Exactly. And so, but there's different things where I thought, and the Romulan ambassador I don't think is as prominent or, is seen necessarily. But anyway.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Well, and to be a little less, I suppose, intellectual for the moment, I thought David Warner was interesting casting, another British actor, of course, in this movie, wasted in a way because, as Chancellor Gorkon, because, well, I'm sure he's done Shakespeare. He's a British actor. But anyway, since he was in Star Trek 5, and then have him in Star Trek 6, because, he's pretty decent actor. I'm not trying to say something. In other words, I'm trying to say he's a name. He's a name. I know David Warner, and, he has some chops. But, he's all, if you timed his appearance in this movie as, 10 minutes, maybe?
Well, Judi Dench, who was in Shakespeare in Love for about 10 minutes, won an Academy Award.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is not about quantity, darling. It is about quality.
I just, is he able to do anything?
Yeah.
I guess maybe he adds the gravitas to Chancellor Gorkon, but I think watching it this time, because I've seen this several times, Gorkon is very, if you don't know what's going on, he's almost a blank slate. Should I trust him, or is he? Yeah,
and we don't get time to figure that out.
Right. Having watched it a million times, obviously he's the good guy. But I'm like, if you suspend the belief for a second.
Yeah. As I was watching it, I was like, I don't know. How's this going to go? Mm-hmm. And then Christopher Plummer showed up, and I was like, oh, there. Let's go in there.
Oh, goodness. Well.
So, speaking of Christopher Plummer, shall we spend a little time on General Chang? Mm-hmm. We've already touched upon his Merchant of Venice Shylock quotations.
Right. Yeah, so I think, people definitely know Star Trek 6 for just Chang, on the chair, spinning around, random Shakespeare, cry havoc and let's sip the dogs of war. Yes. But I think there's a reason people remember this, is it just because it's hammy or because it kind of reminds me a little bit of Star Trek 2, where sort of you have, even though they met earlier, but sort of with Khan and Kirk, it's kind of this about the submarine, war play, one against the other, silent running, who's going to get who. Of course, in this case, it's just the Klingon bird of prey just shooting at the Enterprise till it's about to blow up. But anyway, I still think it's sort of an interesting, I don't know, from a theatrical standpoint, because, you could do this as a play. They're just on both sides of the stage. They're not they're not talking to each other.
Yeah. Literally,
because Kirk can't see where Chang is. But I don't know. Is it just Chris Plummer being a ham and just letting him do whatever he wants to do, or is there meaning behind each of these sort of quotes that he's throwing out there?
I'm not sure that either one of those is completely incorrect or correct. Mm-hmm. I think that if you look at it in Shakespearean terms, Chang is not dissimilar to a sort of MacBeth character in terms of he's killed the king and become the king for all intents and purposes.
First half Macbeth, not crying about it second half Macbeth.
Well, no, but this descent into madness. Maybe
Okay.
maybe he's more Lady Macbeth then.
Mm-hmm.
But this so convinced of his side that it does lead to a little bit of madness. And that also may be why Hamlet is the most quoted Shakespearean play in this.
And do you think it's... I'm about to make fun of this and you'll know why. Is Hamlet overrated? Because we've done a play, that's why we're joking. But anyway, is it just because in U.S. consciousness and the zeitgeist, Hamlet is maybe outside of Romeo and Juliet, is the most known play? Is it just the lines are there? Or do you think there's the special meaning?
I think there is the special meaning, and I also think Hamlet is completely overdone and not often done particularly well. Mm-hmm. But there is how much of Hamlet's madness is feigned and how much of it is real, and does that shift as the play goes further in a way that Chang's potentially does. You know, the more you play at madness, the more perhaps it takes over.
Because I think if we're to, and maybe this is looking at too deep, which I know I keep saying, but
we're doing it, baby.
Yeah, but with General Chang, when he's talking, and I don't know if he says this necessarily, but that his fellow peers are saying this, about Klingons facing death or being watered down culture, or as Chang says, we need breathing room. But he's working with humans,
yes,
and Romulans, the so-called people, So you just have all these. Well, I won't give it a direction. But you have these extremists who are working together for a common cause. But it's, that's even strange bedfellows.
Even though that common cause is that they
fighting each other. Let's work together so then we can fight each other. That's basically kind of what they're arguing for.
Yeah.
Because he kills his own leader. I mean, not him personally, but he puts into motion to kill his own chancellor.
Yes, yeah.
But I do like that sort of sense of other, and I'm sure whether it's Merchant or anything else, that sort of, with Scotty's reminding Spock, like, oh, Klingons aren't like us, she didn't, the daughter didn't shed one bloody tear, Mm-hmm. And he's like, they don't have tear ducts.
Yeah. So shut up. Merchant is a great example of that. Othello is also an example of that. The otherness that Iago ultimately chooses to object to. It's not.
Is Chang an Iago figure?
Maybe, to an extent. I can see, Iago was upset because Othello got promoted over him. Mm-hmm. And we don't get any suggestion that Chang has been overlooked for this chancellor position or anything like that. But certainly the machinations of your right-hand man, as it were.
Hamilton.
Yep. Okay. Because Iago is Othello's right-hand man. Mm-hmm. They are very close friends. Until it all goes.
Because I guess so Chang, what I got, again, it's a simplistic character, and that's not a critique. He's just your villain. Just wants his war.
Yeah.
And this peace means there's not going to be war, and so he doesn't necessarily want to be in charge, whether it's the chancellor or the daughter is the chancellor. I guess he doesn't care, perhaps. He just wants to be able to be General Chang and fight. So,
Yeah, which reminds me of a Doctor Who episode we just watched, but that's completely off topic for the podcast we do.
But are there any specific lines, like I said earlier, that you think have meaning?
Not necessarily that have meaning into themselves.
I mean, like, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot if you don't know, that's fine. But like cry havoc and let's slip the dogs of war. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's a history.
Yep. I thought I'd written that one down. Once more into the breach, dear friends. We have what I do have here, and it gets deeper. So, Undiscovered Country is from Hamlet. Gorkin says something about Brave New World, which is Tempest.
Which I think that's it's when you're watching this, at least, and maybe this is just me. I'll talk about myself. There's a lot of phrases that are so in our language. Mm-hmm. You may not realize they're Shakespearean references.
Yeah.
So, for instance, Brave New World is just sort of a very diplomatic, a very idealistic term, which we use. It's a novel, right?
Yeah.
But that it's, as you say, Shakespearean, and maybe he stole it too. But anyway,
chances are pretty good. But chances are also good that at least he translated it to an extent.
Right.
Parting is such sweet sorrow, Romeo and Juliet, that's what Chang says. And then the further we go, have we not heard the chimes at midnight? Henry IV, Part 2. Let us sit upon the ground and tell the sad stories of the deaths of kings. Richard II. Once more unto the breach, dear friends. Henry V. There's a definitive, then we go back into Hamlet a little bit. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. Julius Caesar.
Well, remember, Klingons don't have tear ducts.
Right, I know, but Chang says it nonetheless. I am constant as the Northern Star is Caesar. Games afoot, Henry V.
Which I think is funny, because Games afoot, I think, is so tied to Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, yeah. Who stole it? Cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war is also Julius Caesar. And of course, and we've had this discussion before as to whether Julius Caesar is a history play or a tragedy. And it seems to fall quite neatly in between. In a way, I mean, we see Macbeth exclusively as a tragedy, even though it is based on history.
Loosely based. I think
I think they're, to an extent, they're all rather loosely based. I mean, Richard III wasn't a hunchback.
Well, but I think of the Julius Caesar. And I guess this is where, and you can correct me, I think with Shakespeare, anything that's not English related, I tend to,
you're going to want to put it in tragedy instead.
No, as a history. I mean, because Julius Caesar, it's so well known, and I say that as everyone knows, and they may not, but I'm saying it's easily discoverable. You can Google Julius Caesar even if you didn't, even in the culture for the past 2,000 years plus, people know the Caesar story. You can't add too much, so people will be like, that's not what happened. I know he killed and Brutus killed, there's...
Yeah, but
you can kind of dramatize a little bit, but making Richard III or doing whatever propaganda, Shakespeare's more likely to play fast and loose with English history, his own.
As you say, for propaganda purposes. Yeah, you could be right. But again, I mean, the idea of...
Anthony and Cleopatra, we know what happened.
Right, but you can still play fast and loose.
Antony
and Cleopatra, yeah, definitely. With the meanings behind it.
Right.
I mean, there's no historical suggestion that Brutus ever regretted killing Caesar.
Right.
And yet...
I think, yeah. Well, he regretted it ultimately, possibly.
Right, but in terms of his own conscience.
Right.
And that's what Julius Caesar's all about, is, the conspirators rethinking whether or not they did the best thing.
Because I think, and I mean, this is being nerdy and non-Star Trek for a second, I think even if he personally didn't have problems with what he did, history shows that you get Augustus. So anything that you were trying to prevent with the consolidation of power for Julius Caesar, it about 10 times it.
So what you're saying is that they went for change and it turned out badly. The undiscovered country was worse than...
That's right. The grass is always greener.
Absolutely. So don't make the change, ladies and gentlemen. Keep everything status quo.
That's right. Or at least don't kill people.
Yeah, okay. All right. And of course, in Julius Caesar, we get one of Shakespeare's many examples of introducing a new word to the English language.
Which would be?
Assassination.
Ah, there you go.
Assassin was a word, but using it as a noun, a thing, rather than a person. Yeah. He also invented the word bubble, but there you go.
That's neither here nor there.
Okay. That's neither here nor there.
I think with the Mirror Universe, they definitely need to know the word assassination.
Yes.
That's pretty much how you get promoted, apparently.
Absolutely. Rumor has it.
Okay.
So, in terms of the whole... Well, first of all, we do need to come back to this suggestion of was Christopher Plummer just hamming it up.
Right.
And as I said, I don't think he does. I don't think that's... And I think that only somebody like Christopher Plummer, who has a massive amount of Shakespeare under his belt. He worked for the Royal Shakespeare Company. He worked for other Shakespeare companies around the world. He does Shakespeare. That's his thing. Forget this Sound of Music crap.
Which I'm sure this is what
Shakespeare is his thing.
I think that's what Christopher Plummer actually says. Forget this
Sound of music crap.
Oh.
Shakespeare's my thing. Yes. Which I think is the only way it could work.
But I think the thing with Christopher Plummer that's surprising, though, we just sort of take it as read. He doesn't strike me. I don't know, man. Obviously, he doesn't strike me as the person who's going to sit in the makeup chair and gonna learn Klingon. You know, I don't know the man. He could be fine. He strikes he's probably, because once you do this and you're older, you probably get a little more difficult is the word I'm looking for. But
curmudgeonly.
Yeah, but he does it. I mean, I think I've tried to read stuff, or I'm trying to remember stuff that I've read about him that he didn't want to do to be full Klingon. But look, he talks Klingon whether they ADR'd it or not, you know. Because at first I thought he was just going to speak English because he's like, I'm not playing. But no, there's parts where he does it. Speaks Klingon, and he has that full makeup thing on. Like, maybe he doesn't have the ridges or you know, whatever, but he has his, you know, you buy that he's a Klingon, or at least I do, right? And so I just think it's all interesting.
And I think there's always an interesting, I mean, you're absolutely right. Actors can be difficult anyway.
Yeah.
And older actors who have the resume that Christopher Plummer has can be very difficult because they've bloody well earned it to an extent. But at the same time, they're still actors.
Right. They're
still going to, you know, I don't believe for one second he chose to do this script because of the money.
Right.
You know, I think that he's probably, he could have stopped after Sound of Music and never done another piece of anything, and he could still have, you know, survived a quite luxurious life. So at the end of the day, no matter how difficult he is, he's going to give it 100%. And I think that anybody else, you know, Shatner, no offense, would not have been able to pull off all those Shakespearean references. He just doesn't have the breadth.
Because I think and again, this is speaking broadly, I'm not trying to offend anything, but to go, you know, who can you find, who's an actor or a character or a villain? Remember, this is the last episode of, or not, the last, you know, so-called movie with the TOS. Obviously, he'll come back in Generations, but, you know, this is it for Captain Kirk as captain of the Enterprise, you know, on the bridge of the Enterprise. What villain or what's his parallel going to be able to measure up to that Captain Kirk? And, you know, Chris Plummer in all of his glory.
Yes.
I mean, because I think that the whole...
Only because Laurence Olivier, I assume, was dead by then.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, when they meet, I think you get the whole, like, you know, I'm a great admirer, and he's like, I'm not sure how to take that.
Yeah.
Even Kirk is saying, like, you're a little much, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So, overall...
Yeah, so getting out of the Klingons, I know we've talked basically Klingon the whole time, but let's talk about the actual story in Starfleet and all that other stuff. As a whole, the Star Trek 6 story, you have, obviously, you know, Captain Kirk, who, again, has his own problems with Klingons, having to look at is a reluctant character throughout this movie because Spock is playing diplomat and has basically set the course, literally and figuratively, for Captain Kirk to be on this peace mission. And, you know, all the characters are fighting change, whether it's getting older, whether it's making peace with the Klingons, and what does that mean, whether it's not making peace with the Klingons, whether it's, you know, your own prejudices, whether you're Kirk and, you know, the death of your son.
Or Kirk and making out with a woman who it turns out is not a woman.
That's right. Well, it must have been his lifelong ambition to kiss himself.
Well, there you go. Yeah, indeed.
But I mean, there's a lot of parts of the assassinations, of course, and the conspiracies, and, you know, all the wonderful stuff. But how are those elements as a whole, the Shakespearean qualities to them?
Yeah, and none of them, you know, this isn't a Shakespearean story.
Right.
It doesn't stand out as a Shakespearean story. But again, there are so many elements, you know, some MacBeth suggestions, some Hamlet suggestions in terms of, is he crazy or what, you know, those sorts of things. A little bit of Lear as well, and maybe again it's the insanity that I'm thinking of, but this idea of change as Lear was growing older and trying to figure out how he was going to divide up his kingdom and things like that. Definitely Julius Caesar, if nothing else than the assassination stuff. And of course, you know, with Julius Caesar, you've got Mark Antony, who is on Julius Caesar's side but has to pretend not to be, and so there are bits and pieces there. There's, you know, I think that there's a lot going on. And then, of course, any of the histories. You know, I think of Richard III a little bit, just because he's portrayed in Shakespeare as such a villain. So yeah, not as much Taming of the Shrew as I would have liked. And not as much, hey, we're twins that are now dressed as the opposite gender.
You didn't see any Midsummer?
There was not enough. No. There was no donkey head.
I don't know.
I feel like there
the
was...
Klingon with the knees. Or not, the alien with the knees. That was something.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You want to go Midsummer on that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could have been bewitched by the fairy queen to have genitalia
at his knees.
Right?
Yep. Good point. And of course, the woman, Imam.
Yeah, Imam.
She is definitely a Titania if there ever was one. So there's that. But yeah, not enough ass heads for my liking.
Right. Well, I think some of the characters were.
Yes, darling.
But yeah, it is just very interesting because I think TOS especially, all of Star Trek perhaps, but TOS blatantly so is very Shakespearean, or at least it doesn't like showing off at that. I mean, I think as I said before, I think a quarter of the TOS episode titles are all just Shakespeare references.
Which is interesting because, of course, Patrick Stewart is
in Next Gen,
a pretty renowned Shakespearean actor.
Yeah, and I don't think it was as blatant in TNG. I mean,
right, and that's what I'm saying. I find that interesting in that you've got this great Shakespearean actor underutilized, if that's the direction you wanted to go in.
Right. And it may just be one of the things you don't want to call attention to what you have just because it's too obvious. Yeah, well, I know we hired a Shakespearean actor, but we didn't hire him to do Shakespeare.
Right. Is that the way? Was that a imitation of Gene Roddenberry right there? Is that what that was?
And put a wig on him. Yeah, that's my imitation. Because I think with Next Gen, not to go off the rails here, but with Next Gen, other than a Hamlet reference in the first season and Q Who, no, actually it's not Q Who, sorry. Now
you can never remember the Q episodes.
I can, I'm sorry. But anyway, the second Q episode, that's usually considered not a great one. But anyway, you get a nice Hamlet reference there. But other than that, I think we only went blatant in the later seasons when you have Data, with Captain Picardus' I guess director in waiting playing King Henry oh lordy.
There was definitely not a King Henry the lordy.
I can't remember which kid. Fifth or sixth, whichever one dressed up as a soldier pretended to be,
yeah, I don't know. I can't keep keep the Henrys all together. Right. I couldn't tell you.
Well, you shouldn't because they don't play well together.
No, they do not. But there's inevitably bloodshed.
And then there's another scene where Data is on the holodeck being Prospero. Anyway.
I would have said Prospero, but okay.
Right. Well, tomato.
But again, a little tempest. And that's always the tempest in a teapot. Yes, a chocolate teapot. We're just going to chuck in as many British references as we can through this.
But I guess, Star Trek 6 is very identified with Shakespeare. I think with Discovery, and I know this, why are you talking about Discovery? But it's with season 2 upcoming, with the clip we talked about. It'll be interesting if they ever go back to that. Other than, I don't know, because I think sometimes with the tragedies and the histories, you can kind of be too stereotypical Shakespeare, which is all stories. What's the great line? There's only 3 stories.
Yes,
that. But I think it's the very darkness. But I think the comedies and even the tragedy of Shakespeare, because I think then you have the lesson. The lesson being someone dies. That you have to be brought down, and hence that's why it's called a tragedy. Instead of just the assassinations and twists.
Hubris.
Yeah. That would be nice.
Yeah. Maybe they should go a little bit more Greek. As dark as Discovery is, maybe that's where they need to go. Sort of Oedipus and Antigone and Agamemnon and all of those.
Agamemnon, sorry.
So
it's boring.
Yeah.
Boring. Well, let's get some excitement, darling. So for next week, I thought we would talk about Discovery, TOS, a little TNG. I think we might talk about all the crews and kind of smashing them together in a kind of a Star Trek Hunger Games.
A mashup.
Yeah, who against who maybe, or
like a Final Four. You got to do a bracket.
A bracket, because we're all about sports ball.
We are so about sports ball. We're gonna go watch. Is sports ball still on? Or are we gonna watch?
I don't. I don't
Are
know.
we going to play? What?
Is it the
I don't-
Parisi Squares tournament still on?
Yeah, darts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah.
a good DS9
Yeah.
reference.
Outdoor bowling.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Skittles.
Water polo.
Water polo. Love it.
Yeah.
I just can't get over how long those horses can hold their breath.
I think you've been doing it wrong.
But yes, I kind of like the idea of a bracket. Just putting that out there.
Okay. Yeah, so submit your Star Trek bracket, and we'll go from there.
I think you have to give them some guidelines, but that doesn't have to be done now. Carry on.
All right. Well, until next week, I'm Phillip Gilfus.
And I'm Jessica Nunn.
And we're stranded here on Ceti Alpha 3.